Hi everyone, and welcome to Teach Me How to Bake. I'm your chef instructor, Chef Kimberly Houston, but you can also call me Chef Kimmy Who. Now before we dive into things, let me tell you a little bit about myself. You may have seen me on Bravo a couple of times. I hang out with the Real Housewives of Atlanta. I've also been on Apple TV with Crafting with Lynn Lilly. Oh my God, you must watch that show. Also, I'm on YouTube. Make sure you follow me at Chef Kimmy Who. I'm also a blogger at chefkimmywho.com. I have a podcast called The Baking Mama. Make sure you listen to that one for all tips, tricks, and all things entrepreneurship as a baker. You can also find me in the July issue of American Cake Decorating magazine. I'm also featured in a couple of other magazines in Atlanta, South Fulton Lifestyle magazine, as well as the Peachtree Papers for the Junior League of Atlanta. Now, you guys ready to get started? Let's go. For this lesson, we are going to start off talking about food safety. Now, as a Serve Safe certified chef, there's several things that I do in my kitchen that you might not do in yours. One of the first things that I can remember from culinary school at Le Cordon Bleu was not leaving your eggs out in order to bring them to room temperature. So here's my tip. If you take your eggs and put them in a bowl of warm water at the start, your eggs will be brought up to room temperature when you're ready to do your recipe. Now, here's the reason for this. You know how when you go to the grocery store, it says grade A eggs. When you leave your eggs out at room temperature, you decrease the grade the longer they sit out. So that actually means your eggs can go bad. So an easy way to do this is to just add them to a bowl of warm water for about 5 minutes. They'll come up to room temperature and then they'll be ready to go. So the next thing we're going to talk about is kitchen safety using sharp objects, okay? Now, we will talk about using our knives and how to properly hold them. We'll talk about using paring knives when we're using fruit. But we're going to start by talking about when we're going to do something like this, okay? A lot of people can either use a knife when they want to peel something. That doesn't really help if you're using this with children. Or they use the flat ones. How many times have you cut your finger doing that? So you can find these on Amazon. Yes, there is a link that will be in the class notes. And you can just go online and grab one. So when we're doing this, you want to go away from the body, okay? So now we have a clean cut and you did not risk taking off your knuckles. If you wanted to do this with the knife, I know we have seen our grandmothers paring this way, right? And they come towards themselves. I don't like that. So if you feel like you have to come towards yourself when you do this, number one, make sure your thumb is pressed up against your apple and you're going to very lightly cut. This way, you don't take off all the apple, you just remove the skin, okay? But if we take a look at this, we have jagged edges by using a paring knife as opposed to using this. So depending on your presentation, it's going to help you decide which way you want to go, okay? If you want to go away from yourself, especially if you're doing this in the kitchen with kids, I would encourage you to hold with one hand like a claw. And then you're going to cut down. It's okay if you cut small ones instead of going all the way down, because this way, number one, you're working on your arm muscles. If you notice the positioning of my body, my elbow is into my side. That's super important. This way, I won't get tired while I'm working in the kitchen. And then you can just cut like that. So you can take your pick, whichever one works. Now, when it comes to using large knives in the kitchen, a lot of times we notice people holding their knives like this. I don't really recommend that, especially if you're cutting a lot of things, because this finger is going to get really tired. So you want to hold your knife like this and you're going to saw back and forth. Perfectly clean cut. So if you were going to cut your butter, remember, we're not resting our finger up here. If you notice, once again, my elbow is in my side. This way you don't strain yourself. And we make a smooth cut. Now, one of the most important things you need to remember when working in kitchen, especially if you're baking, is that your knives need to be sharp. We don't want to use anything dull. That's how accidents happen. And that is definitely how people cut themselves. But I'm making smooth cuts straight down into my butter. And then I'm going to come back and cut around. And this is how we would chop our butter. If you notice, my hands aren't really touching the butter. The reason for that is that my body heat will melt it. So I like to keep it on the plastic that it came in. That way I know it's not going to melt on my countertop. Here we go. Now we've got perfectly chopped butter. So one of my absolute favorite tools in the kitchen is a whisk. I mean, come on, I'm a pastry chef. I use a whisk for everything, right? But did you guys know there's more than one kind of whisk? So they now have flat whisk, which will work if you're not really trying to incorporate a lot of air, right? So if I just want to take my flour and kind of break it up, or maybe cocoa powder, and you just want to break it up a little bit, but you don't really want to incorporate any air, you're not mixing anything, this is going to be the perfect whisk for you. Now, the type of whisk that we're all used to is this one. So, number one, for kitchen safety, make sure you don't stick your fingers through here. They can get stuck. And secondly, when we're using it, again, so remember with the knife, how we want to watch this finger. We have a tendency to hold our whisk like this. Don't do that. Hold your whisk, good grip, and then you're going to stir it. And now, yes, if you've been on social media at any point this year, you know that you can pick up flour with your whisk, but don't, because then you're not going to get a proper measurement. But that's okay, because right now I'm going to show you how to properly measure your flour without using a whisk. Welcome back, guys. In this lesson, we are going to talk about measuring. So we're all super familiar with our measuring cups. This is for dry ingredients. This is for wet ingredients. Okay, so I know you guys are like, why? Why does that matter? Well, there's a very simple reason why it matters. Number one, if you go over to your sink and you put water in this, 9 times out of 10, you're going to spill the water before you get back to where you're going. If you use this, it has a lid and you can pour it easily. You're not going to make a mess. So, dry ingredients, wet ingredients. We got it? Okay. Now that we understand that, this will go a little easier. So these are your measuring spoons. Now, measuring spoons come in different sizes. Here's something I can tell you. If you're looking at a recipe and it says a smidge of something, it says salt to taste, that is not a proper measurement, right? Well, did you know you could look it up online and see how much that actually is? So a lot of times, like a smidge or a pinch, it's 1/8 of a teaspoon. And this actually exists. So the next time you're looking for measuring cups and measuring spoons, make sure you're looking for ones that go all the way down to 1/8, okay? Because this is going to be your pinch or your smidge. Now, I also have tablespoons, and a lot of times we may need 3, 4, half a tablespoon. This particular set comes with half a tablespoon. Another thing, if you need 3/4 of something, you essentially just need 1/4 3 times. It's fractions, it's math. There is no 3/4 teaspoon. Just do 1/4 teaspoon 3 times. Got it? All right, so now that we understand this, we are going to measure some flour. So now we're going to measure, and we're going to use what's called a scoop and level measure, okay? A lot of times when you're looking at recipes for cakes or cookies, it'll say 3 cups. Well, when you do this, that's not a cup. That's actually more than a cup. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. If you don't have a kitchen scale, this is how you're going to measure. So we're going to take our smaller cup and I'm going to pour it inside. This is half a cup. This is 1 cup and it's already almost full. So I'm going to add in just a little bit more. that was our scoop. We're gonna tap it. This is gonna get any air bubbles out. And then you're gonna do like this on the top and come back and smooth it off. That is a cup of flour. Now, if you say, what if I need just half a cup of flour? Go the other way. So if we use a cup, we scoop it. You're gonna tap it, and then you're gonna level it off. Now we've got 1.5 cups of flour. Doing it this way will ensure that, number one, your baked goods aren't going to be too heavy. They won't be too dense, and they'll be light and fluffy. A lot of times you try recipes and you're like, this was super dense. It doesn't taste really good. It's because you added too much flour. So when you do it this way, we're not going to add too much. There's one more way I'd like to show you how to measure your ingredients, which is probably the best way to do it. Okay, so here's how we learned how to measure flour in culinary school. So being a student at Le Cordon Bleu, everything was like super nitpicky. We wore white chef coats that could never get dirty, ever. So one of the things we really had to learn was how to be efficient in the kitchen without having a mess everywhere, okay? So when we were measuring flour, it didn't matter what size cup you actually picked up because we're measuring it on a scale. So when you use a kitchen scale, you want to make sure that you start at 0. And then we're just going to add the flour in here until it gets to however much we need. And I'm going to do just a little bit more. All right. This is going to give us the exact amount of flour that we need. No, that's not the same as if we scooped it or even if we did the scoop and level method. The scoop and level method is the closest that we're going to get when it comes to the weight of our products inside of our bowl. So we need you guys to remember, if you really, really want to be proficient at baking, or if you're looking at a recipe and it says that you need 16 grams of something, you're going to be able to do that with the kitchen scale. I highly recommend anyone who is serious about becoming a baker get very familiar with the kitchen scale. All right, guys, so in this lesson, we're going to talk about flour because all flour is not created equal. So I know a lot of you are probably wondering, what do we do about dietary restrictions, right? If someone is gluten-free and you want to change a recipe, but you're not really sure how you can do that, a super simple way to do it is to use a 1-to-1 ratio gluten-free flour. What that means is that it is going to act just like an all-purpose flour. The only difference is that it's gluten-free. Now, I will tell you this, if you head over to your class notes, you're going to see some things about gluten-free baking, and it'll tell you that make sure you're using different utensils. Gluten-free baking is, you can't just use a different flour and think you're good to go. You need to use completely different utensils whenever you are working with dietary restrictions, whether it's sugar-free, gluten-free, keto, whatever. Use completely different equipment or else you run the risk of cross-contamination, okay? So another thing a lot of people like to use is almond flour. Now, if you look at almond flour, it looks very, very different from all the rest of them. But that's because it's made from ground almonds. Can you make it at home? Of course you can. You can check your class notes for a recipe on that too. The next one we have is going to be bread flour. Now, we're not going to really get into it on the bread flour for this one because there is a bread making masterclass coming soon. So make sure you are looking for that one. But did you know if you use bread flour, your chocolate chip cookies are actually going to be softer and chewier? Remember that B that I got in culinary school? It's because I was used to working with all-purpose flour and not bread flour. So even though I got a B, I learned a very, very valuable lesson because now B stands for bread flour. And then lastly, the one we are all super familiar with, all-purpose flour. All-purpose flour literally works for all purposes. If you're looking for more information about the different types of flours and how you can use them in baking, make sure you head over to my blog at chefkimiwho.com and click on the extra stuff up at the top, and you're going to see a link that's going to take you to something all about the different kinds of flours. All right, guys, so in this lesson, we are going to talk about leavening agents, but I figured a really easy way to do this would be to do it while we do a recipe, because leavening agents are bountiful. There are so many things that happen in order for your things to rise, and that's all a leavening agent is. It is the thing inside of the recipe that is going to cause your baked good to get bigger in the oven. So I decided we were going to do this with red velvet cupcakes. Now, when we do red velvet cupcakes, yes, there's chocolate in it, because that's one of my leavening agents for this one. The cocoa powder, the buttermilk, air, and eggs. Plus, at the very, very end, we're going to do a really cool little chemistry experiment with some baking soda and vinegar, and we're going to fold it in at the very end. All of those things, when they come together inside of the oven, are what is going to cause our red velvet cupcakes to rise. If you're used to using cake mixes, this stuff is already in there. So that's why your cake mix comes perfectly. They've already measured out all the things that you're going to need for a chemical reaction to happen in the oven. But for this particular recipe, we're going to make all the magic happen ourselves, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we need to sift all of our dry ingredients. Whenever a recipe tells you to sift the ingredients, make sure you do just that. One of the biggest reasons is because if you don't, you may end up with a mouthful of something that doesn't taste very good, right? So we're going to sift our cocoa powder, our granulated sugar, and our flour together in a sifter, and then we're going to set that to the side. So that's step one of this recipe. You can find this in your class notes. It is definitely one that I recommend my students use. It's super delicious. I promise you're gonna love it. I'm gonna put my cocoa powder in here. And if you notice, I'm actually putting my sugar in here first, right? Typically, you don't do that whenever you're doing a recipe. Now, I like to use a whisk in order to push it through, because if not, you might make a mess. And I don't really like to make a mess in the kitchen. So it's up to you. You can tap it on the side, or you can use your whisk to help pull it through. All right, once we have everything sifted, you'll see that there are actually still some pretty big balls of chocolate left in here of the cocoa. We don't want that in our cupcakes, so we're just not gonna use it. Now that I have my dry ingredients sifted, I'm gonna set it to the side, and I'm going to combine my wet ingredients. So for this one, we're using 2 eggs. Now, anytime a recipe tells you that you're gonna combine your eggs and maybe your oil and your buttermilk, go ahead and break them up first. So if you just tap the top of them, that breaks the yolk, and then it's easier for you to whisk them instead of trying to chase it around in your bowl. So now I have those. I'm actually gonna pour my eggs over in here. And we're just gonna give it a little bit of a mix, and then we're gonna add my buttermilk. All right, so instead of trying to whisk like this, if you just go like this, you give it a good little mix. We don't need too much, just enough. We want to make sure that our egg white doesn't stick. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna start with my wet ingredients in a large bowl. And we're gonna give it just a little bit of a mix. Not a really big one. just enough for it to come together. Now when we're doing this, we're essentially creating an emulsion. Common emulsions are things like salad dressing, mayonnaise, anything where you have to combine oil and a fat together, because we have our oil in here, right? And you can combine that with any type, eggs, anything like that. We're creating an emulsion. So right now it's looking super frothy, which is a good thing. That is exactly what we want. I'm going to stop that for just 1 second so that we can add in a little bit of our flour mixture. Now this we're going to mix until we bring it together. All right, I'm going to add in the rest of it. Now for this part, we actually want to incorporate quite a bit of air into our batter, because that is going to help our cupcakes rise in the oven. Okay, so our batter has come together, but remember, these are red velvet, right? So at this point, we're going to add in a couple of drops of red food coloring. My preference is a gel food color, but for red velvet cupcakes, it's okay if you use a liquid. And then we're also going to give it just a little bit of vanilla. Now you may be wondering, why did I wait to the end to do this? Honestly, it just makes my kitchen smell better. No other reason. Now this part, you can control how red your cupcake batter is going to become. You can add a lot, you can add a little. It's totally up to you, but remember, the more you add, the more you run the risk of turning people's mouths red. So after we mix it in with our mixer, I'm just going to give it a good little whisk through with my spatula here. I want to make sure that there are no streaks of color left in the batter. So that looks great. Okay, so right now we have our batter 99% complete. The last piece of this is going to be one of the biggest leavening agents in these cupcakes. So we're going to take our vinegar and we're going to add it to our baking soda. Did you hear that fizz? And now we're going to add this over into our batter. It's still fizzy in the batter. And right now I'm just going to fold it. You don't want to stir it because you'll knock out all the air that we've incorporated with our mixer. And we're just going to fold it from the bottom until all the streaks disappear. So have you guys ever been making cupcakes and you're like, why are the bottom of these so oily? Did you know you can add rice right into the bottom? You want it to be flat, so don't pile too much rice in here, okay? But just enough to cover the bottom. And the rice will help absorb the oil that can be left on the bottom of your cupcake liners. So if you're using liners that are colorful or if they have a design on them, definitely use this trick. That way the bottom of your cupcake liners aren't ruined. So we're just going to add those back in, and then we're going to evenly divide this between our 12 cups. You can use an ice cream scooper. You could use a spoon if you're working with children. Just remember, however many spoons you use, make sure you use that amount in every single one of them, okay? Or you can use like a 1/4 or a 1/3 measuring spoon. those work beautifully too. Whenever you're doing your cupcakes, you don't want to go over 3/4 full because that's how you get the muffin tops. So you want to make sure you stay under 3/4. About a halfway to 3/4 normally works beautifully. And we're just going to fill these up. The magic will happen once it's in the oven because our cocoa powder, our buttermilk, our vinegar, and the baking soda are all going to cause a chemical reaction inside of the oven to make these cupcakes rise. All right, once we have all of our cupcake batter evenly distributed into our cups, and let's say you look down and maybe one has more than another one does, or you're right at the very last one and you don't have enough to fill it up, just go take a little bit out of each of them and fill in that last one. I promise you it works beautifully. We're gonna take these, we're gonna pop them in the oven. We'll be right back. All right, guys, so my cookies are done. They are out of the oven, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit with you guys. So remember how I told you that when I was in culinary school at Le Cordon Bleu, I got a B on my cookie practical? I'm still a little sad. However, at this point, I have definitely perfected how to do cookies. I want to share with you a couple of things that might help you in your cookie journey. So number one, I baked them on a parchment lined baking sheet. That's number one. Number two, my cookies cooled on the baking sheet. I know you see a lot of things that say, take them off and put them on a cookie rack and let them, cool off that way. I don't ever do that. I leave my cookies on the baking sheet. The reason for that is this. When they're in the oven, I don't let them become fully brown on the top. As soon as the edges start to turn brown, I remove them from the oven. And then I will sit them on top of the oven and allow them to continue cooling. But they're doing two things at once. I've removed them from the heat of my oven, but the pan itself is still hot, which means my cookies are continuing to cook outside of the oven. This way, when I go to pick one up, it's so soft. It's so soft. This will not happen if you leave it in too long, or if you decide you're going to take them off and change the temperature that they're on too quickly, okay? So my cookies are super, super, super soft. Look at that. It's crazy. Now, how do you keep your cookies soft? So I want to tell you something I learned while I was getting my master's degree in education. One of the things that happened was that I spent a lot of time in coffee shops. A lot of time in coffee shops. So while I would be in coffee shops working on papers and doing different things, I would always get a coffee and a cookie. And I was like, these cookies are so hard. Do they not know they can keep these things softer? And so one day I remember walking up to the lady behind the counter and I said, hey, did you know that if you stick a piece of bread over into your airtight container where you store your cookies in the evening, your cookies will be soft? And they were like, there's no way. And I said, just try it and I'll see you tomorrow. So the next day when I went back, because I was working on my final exam, lo and behold, those chocolate chip cookies were soft. And from that day forward, they were all like, that's the cookie lady that told us how to get soft cookies. So just remember this little tidbit. Whenever you make your cookies, they can still be soft and fresh every day after. All you have to do is put them into an airtight container, add a piece of bread, and every day change the piece of bread out. The bread will be hard when you remove it, but all of your cookies will still be soft. Let me know if you guys try this cookie recipe, if it's delicious. Head over to my Instagram profile, look for the chocolate chip cookie page, and then let me know if you tried this recipe. My red velvet cupcakes are now out of the oven. So I wanted to show you really quickly. The ones that we use the rice on the bottom, just kind of knock it off. See, they're all nice and pretty. The other thing about this is when you're doing vanilla cupcakes and you flip them over, did you know your vanilla cupcakes should not be brown on the bottom? That means you've overbaked them. Just a little tip. But for the ones that we didn't use it, see, there's just a little bit of oil that's on them. Not too much, but if this were a darker color cupcake liner, it would totally mess it up. So before I get into decorating these, I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for joining me for Teach Me How to Bake the Masterclass. And just so you know, this is not the end. We have Bread Making 101 coming up, the art of bundt cakes, and of course, cupcake, cake decorating, and cookie decorating. All of those things are on the way. Make sure you are subscribed to my YouTube channel. Make sure you follow me on social media at Chef Kimmy Who on every single platform. And I'll see you guys in the next class.